I have Chris Buescher here. Chris Buescher. I keep saying Buescher.
That was right.
That was Bush.
Yeah, it's Buescher. You had it.
Oh my God! It's just Bush. It's just Bush.
It's just Bush.
It's Bush. Buescher.
Way too many letters in there. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
I get it. I get it. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Smith. I'm a lean supply chain consultant with Fastenal. So when it comes to supply chain, it can be very intimidating, very difficult and complex to understand sometimes, but that's what you have me here for, right? I'm a supply chain expert. Now on the other side of things, I don't know as much about NASCAR. So that's why we have Chris Buescher here to help us out with that part.
Absolutely. Looking forward to carrying the correlation over. So admittedly, we've had a long-term partnership with Fastenal here. But I don't know enough about supply chain either, so I'm here to learn with y'all as well and try and gather a little bit more information. With that, we can start flipping some of these cards over.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready to learn some more NASCAR.
Let's do it. All right, so firing off, our first term here is going to be dirty air. So dirty air in the NASCAR world is frustration. But there's a lot more to it. But when you have dirty air, it's because there are other cars around. It's not that there's dirt in the air, it's turbulent air from other race cars that takes away potential from what we're able to do on the racetrack. So you're always trying to come up with some way to place your race car in a better spot where you could find cleaner air. When we get into a race, there's 40 cars out. It's never gonna be perfect, but you're always looking for cleaner air so that you're not at a deficit to some of your other competitors.
Okay. So dirty air sounds similar to something in supply chain that I know. I think we could compare that to disruption. Disruption in the supply chain network is essentially anything that takes away from the flow of supply chain. So any of you experts out there that know Lean and know Lean Six Sigma, these are all key terms, Chris. I'll explain them a little bit later.
Okay, we're coming back.
But with Lean, it's all about improving flow, right, and eliminating waste in the supply chain. So let's say the supply chain network is something simple. It's step one, it's step two, it's step three, right? A disruption would be anything that takes away from those three steps, right? So now instead of step one, step two, it's step 1.1, 1.2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And those are things that just take away from the natural flow, the strategic flow of your supply chain. So it seems a little bit like this dirty air in the NASCAR world.
Yeah, that sounds frustrating to me. So
it's frustrating.
Yeah, I get that one for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. All right,
let's slide that one away. All right, so the next NASCAR term that we're gonna come up with here is driver. I better be able to explain this one.
I sure hope so.
But so as the driver, basically the best way I could explain it is all the final decisions come down to me being behind the wheel. There is a network of people that are giving me information, that are helping us tune a race car to be better, that are getting us through traffic, through accidents, whatever it may be. But ultimately, I have my hands on the steering wheel, right? The weight is on my shoulders to make the right decision that ultimately is going to affect the outcome for our entire group.
Wow.
So best way I know to describe a driver, it's the one that gets probably most of the credit while not doing most of the work.
Gotcha.
But it does create a very important role, and is very key to having a good day.
Right, okay. So driver. In supply chain management, I guess that would be equivalent to a supply chain manager. So the supply chain manager is kind of, to Chris's point here in NASCAR world, is that individual that is responsible for making the real-time decisions, right? If something changes within that supply chain, right? We have a disruption in that supply chain. It's the supply chain manager's responsibility to assess, right? Understand what that disruption is and plan mitigation or corrective action plan. There's many different terms you can use to describe it, but whatever you want to call it, they have to do it for the sake of the entire production team, right? And you mentioned that sometimes your position, right? You get a lot of the visibility, but a lot of that work is not on your plate, right? You have to make the decisions with the information, but there's a team supporting. I think we have a term a little bit later that we could probably use to define that team there. So supply chain manager and driver. Awesome.
Sounds good. All right. So the next term we have here, speaking of it, is the pit crew. So the pit crew is another one of those parts of our web that contribute to our success on a race weekend. Our pit crew have a couple of key roles. Maybe the most obvious is when we are out of gas, when we have killed a set of tires and we are down to wear bars and we are hanging on for dear life as a driver, and I'm sitting here screaming and begging for another set of tires. It's time for the pit crew to do work, right? Yeah. So we come down pit road. The pit crew is who enables us to refuel, to put tires back on a race car, and to go again, to be able to continue on our race. It is that maintenance in there. Right. A lot's riding on their shoulders to be able to enable us to come down pit road
Perform,
and work well in a 10-second window, right?
Yeah.
It's a very small opportunity, but there's a ton of importance in that tight window.
Yeah, okay, wow. So I'm drawing a lot of parallels here. So I think when it comes to supply chain, pit crew would be comparable to the operations team. So a lot of the things that you mentioned there, the qualities of, right, there's a standard of, a very high standard of excellence that's required, really, out of the operations team, out of the pit crew, because essentially they're the ones doing the work, right? So they're their boots on the ground is what we call it in the industry. So
I got that one, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm on
that's
board
another
with
term
right
later.
Yeah.
So they're the boots on the ground folks that, hey, you're the driver, and in our last example, the supply chain manager, and the supply chain manager or the driver has, hey, I need this, right? Yeah, I need a tire, I need a supplier that can meet my KPIs, et cetera. The operations teams are the ones that are actually doing that work, right? They're doing the inventory management. It's going to be cycle counts, things like that. And really, it's the operations team, and it seems like the pit crew's responsibility to make sure that they do the work to that standard of excellence so that the driver or the supply chain manager and the organization at the end of the day can succeed and meet their KPIs, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, awesome. I mean, operations team, pit crew. Yeah, hand in hand.
Sounds like it comes down to efficiency.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right there. It's all about efficiency.
Absolutely, always.
All right. So getting into our next term here, this one's a fun one for me. So lap times. When we talk about lap times, this is our ultimate measure of our success on a race weekend. Okay. This is how we decide what changes are necessary versus what may be wanted. There's sometimes where you can be very good, but you want to be more comfortable behind the wheel. Right. There's a balance to make sure that you're continuing to create really good lap time. It is one of the things that probably come back to the most during a race weekend. Okay. What were our lap times in any given session, and how do we improve them to be better next time?
Got it, okay, nice. So lap time sounds sort of like, the word is coming to me, it's sounding like lead time. So lead times, similar to lap times, are a KPI. A KPI essentially is a key performance indicator, and we use that in supply chain to measure different variables to see how they're performing and make adjustments so that you can maximize efficiency, right? Things like that within the supply chain. Lead time in supply chain is kind of like that KPI that we measure like vendors by. So sometimes a vendor may be able to get you the part that you need, but can they do it in an efficient manner so that you can receive the part and get it on the product so the product can get shipped out without missing deadlines for your customer? It's how you determine, can you succeed, right? And you track that in real time. So yeah,
that's
awesome.
A good point. That's kind of funny you say that. We can have the best looking Fastenal for the racetrack, but if it's not fast, we're not able to compare with lap times, then ultimately it's not what we need to get the job done.
That's right, and you got to make adjustments.
There you go.
Awesome, awesome. Let's see what else we got.
So as we get close to the end here, so yet another key part is crew chief. So crew chief for us is ultimately the decision maker for everything that happens before the weekend starts for us. Setups at the race shop leading into a weekend. What changes we make during a race. I will talk about as a driver what I need differently for the car to do, whether that's turn better, stop better. It's the crew chief's decision to decide what that may be. And then they also have all the strategy of our race weekends. So it's not as simple as turning left and put the throttle down, right? There's a lot that goes into our weekends. And I have input as the driver and as that one there, but I don't have all this information surrounding me to be able to make those those decisions, and honestly, I'm not smart enough to do it.
Right.
But as a crew chief, we are able to take all that information and make those decisions and really keep everybody in line and accountable for their actions as well, right?
Okay, all right, so crew chief, right? Words coming to my mind here is logistics manager. So in supply chain, the logistics manager is basically comparable to crew chief in ways that they're receiving in information that sometimes the supply chain manager may not even know. The supply chain manager has this scope of work, and sure, they may oversee the logistics of things to a degree as well. However, the logistics manager is responsible for managing, we talked about lead times earlier and lap times. They're the ones looking at those lead times and those lap times to assess, right, okay, we need 5 more seconds here, we need 2 less seconds here, things like that. And in supply chain, that logistics manager saying, hey, you know, there's predicted to be snowfall in Pennsylvania that could potentially impact our supply chain. Should I expedite it to get it here sooner before the weather hits, or do we delay, and what's the cost of delay, right? What's the cost of that? Awesome, all right. We're down to the last card, folks, the last one here.
Final one, you ready?
Let's do it, ready for it.
Here we are, so racetrack. Racetrack for us is another interesting one because our sport's very unique in this sense. This is our home base here where we build race cars, but the racetrack is where our sport happens. So we go to a racetrack every weekend. We know what that racetrack is, but the thing about it is it's different week to week. You get one opportunity to go to a racetrack and make that your best showing.
Wow.
And it requires a lot of strategy ahead of time. That requires a lot of planning so that we are able to anticipate what the racetrack's going to look like to us. It, in theory, is the same, right? We're always going to a racetrack, but it is always a different venue for us.
Okay. So for racetrack, the supply chain term that comes to mind is going to be your supply chain network. Under the umbrella term of racetrack and supply chain network, everybody has one essentially, right? So he's been to many different racetracks, and it's a racetrack, right? I've seen and consulted with so many clients that have supply chain networks. Everyone has one. But it's till you narrow down to the nuances of each one, right? Supply chains can be vastly different. I mean, the way that they order product, the way that they hold product, how much they hold. One might have an integrated supplier within there, right? So it's so many different ways that they can have their supply chain network set up that it's not enough to just say, hey, it's a supply chain network. Hey, it's a racetrack. All right, that finishes up our segment here, guys. I hope you learned a lot more about both supply chain and NASCAR. I mean, we were able to pick these terms, and I hope we were able to demonstrate the correlation between each so that you can see and understand both supply chain and NASCAR that much better.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned a bunch, so I appreciate that as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in.